What's up? Welcome to the Marsh Pod, episode 4. Recording this October 24th. Great episode coming up here. This week we had the announcement of the existing rosters for SimWorld Hoops for the 2023 season. Of course, that starts in March. We are 1 week away from the beginning of recruiting. That's November 1st. We went over the schedule last week. This week, want to touch on what some of these rosters can do, what some of these gaps are. I don't know that we're going to go through every single team. We might probably start updating stuff as some of these signings come through and how that impacts them. But at the very least this week, today and moving into Thursday's episode, wanted to talk about the final 4 teams that we had last season. So for a refresher, of course, those 4 teams were Miami. Now that's the Yacht Club, Southeast Select, originally staying as Southeast Select, Pacific Northwest Select, that's now Cascadia, and then of course the Chicago Stars turned into Lakeshore Drive. So wanted to take a look at those 4 teams. Now, why those 4 teams? Well, because I think the top outside of Southeast Select, I think we kind of know New York. You know, they're going to be hot on the trail. Washington, looking just at former names, of course. I think it's easy to look at those top teams, but I think there's a reason that they were there. What I kind of think is a little more interesting is to look at just the final 4 teams that we had. I think that's the easiest way to go about it. So that's what we're going to do. So to start this week, or today, we're going to start with our championship game, and then we're going to move on from there to the other 2 teams that missed out on it. So that means we start off with our defending champions, Cascadia, led by, of course, Finn Hayes. They are going to need a complete overhaul of this roster to defend. And they were a good team last year. I wouldn't consider them a great team. I'd be remiss to think they should have been odds-on favorites entering the tournament. They had a good season, and they had a really good run to the championship game, but that included not having to go through Run DMV because H-Town Hoopers pulled the upset, the team that couldn't get their act together all season. So they avoided really having to face a lot of the elite teams, especially because Lakeshore Drive pulled an upset to get Jamison Johnson out of there in the second round. So they didn't have to face the 2 teams on their side of the bracket that were ranked higher than them. So take that championship from Finn Hayes with whatever grain of salt you want. But they're going to need a complete overhaul. So let's start at the 5 spots. Playmaking, shooting, interior defense, perimeter defense, and athleticism. Where can they, or what do they need to do? Started with playmaking, they have nothing. They have Kenny May, so I guess not technically nothing. But that's it. They don't have really this breadth of talent that can create for one another. In theory, that's not the end of the world, but Kenny May isn't the type of takeover guy like CKC was a year ago. So they'll need to find a way to bring in, whether that's guard or wing talent, whether that's an interior big who can play make. They need something because Kenny May didn't prove a year ago that he can be the guy to carry a team as the lone playmaker. So finding a way to improve there is going to be one of the keys, especially considering some of the players that returned. It was a guard-heavy, wing-heavy league last season in terms of overall dominance, so they're going to need to try to play some catch-up to put themselves in a position there. Shooting, they had a couple good shooters, Jetson Halliday the third and Torian Lane. I think that's good. It's a good start, but it's very dangerous, and no matter what you do, it's going to be unproven, but it's dangerous to go into a season with 2 unproven shooters. So improving there, I think a lot of these teams, we should probably just get this out of the way, a lot of them are going to need to improve in all 5 areas, right? But some of them are going to be in a better spot than others. So for Cascadia, at least they're starting with a pair of shooters, and at least they have one playmaker who enters with some experience. That's a good start. Where they have quite literally nothing is perimeter defenders. This is a team that has nobody on the roster that you could look at and say, that's a guy that's going to be a good perimeter defender. That will obviously need to change. They will not be able to survive without that. That, in my opinion, might be the number one. You need shooting, you need playmaking, but you don't have anyone that you can put on the best players. The guys like Trey Turner, who we'll talk about in a second, you need somebody like that. Cascadia doesn't have that. That's, to me, is top priority. They do add a couple good interior defenders. Braylon Ring-Gulage is a really good wing option who can defend inside. Go for a small ball look if you're Coach Finn Hayes, if you can develop him into a little bit better shooter or maybe a two-way defender, both interior and on the perimeter. And then, of course, the big Brendan Romine, also a newcomer. A lot of these teams are going to be full of newcomers, right? But that he's a good option inside. That you're working from a good starting point if you're Finn Hayes in terms of your interior and your really just your interior defense, right? Because their perimeter defense is few and far between. Athletically, Danny Zara is really the only other one that I would lock in as their maybe number 3 priority. I don't think you have to be overly athletic to win a championship. You need defense, you need playmaking. I would put that number 3. Number 1 is, as we said, perimeter defense improving there. Number 2 is playmaking. And then that third item to watch is athleticism. Let's move over to the other side of the championship bracket where they took down Southeast Select and head coach Brett Lee. They've got, in my opinion, one of the, and maybe this isn't a shocker actually, so I shouldn't say this. It's pretty well known they have one of the best starting points for this season with Trey Turner. Okay, you got shooting and you got a star. What else do you have? Not a lot, and that's where they're gonna need it. Before we even get to what this roster looks like, I did want to just do a quick shout out to Coach Lee for bringing in a pair of South Florida players in Kalen Brazel Jr. and Devonta Dees. That's not easy to go outside of your market. He goes all the way to South Florida to nab somebody off of the yacht club area. That's a good piece. So going through the pieces that they have, shooting, just like Cascadia has no defense, Southeast has no perimeter playmaking. They're going to need that. Trey Turner is a great shooter, but he's not a facilitator. And where he blossomed last season was being able to operate off ball, getting open off of screens, getting open off of pin downs, coming up above the arc and making shots. If he doesn't have somebody who can routinely get him the ball, then it will not really matter how much he's on this team. I would say consider Trey Turner in the Klay Thompson type of realm. Great shooter, talented shooter, but he's not going to be able to carry you single-handedly. Shooting outside of Turner, Kalen Brazel Jr., who we talked about coming from South Florida, is a good option. So they've already walking in with 2 shooters. One of them might be the best in the league. You have to feel confident there. Defense, again, Turner profiles as a good perimeter defender. He proven that last season. Shake Travis is a second one. He's returning. That's a good starting point as well. If you can really start with at least 2 pieces at any of these 5 kind of necessary attributes, you're in a good spot. So they have Turner, they got Travis, that's good. Post defense is a little scarce. They enter with just the unproven 16-year-old Xavier Rubin Matthew. That's not a bad starting point. It's better than nothing, but it's not a team that you look at and feel great about, especially considering how dominant the league was. Definitely led by guards, but there was a lot of dominant bigs in the league last season. Jameson Johnson being certainly the most dominant, but you look at Johnny Baldwin being another option. It was very difficult to win games without at least some competency inside. They'll need that from Reuben Matthew or anyone else they add. And then athletically, I think they're actually in a great spot. Reuben Matthew is an above the rim player. He's a guy that I think you should feel pretty good about, especially if you can add playmaking as a pick and roll option. But then there's Darian Banks, there's Terrell Pearson, and then there's Shake Travis. So with 4 really good athletes, I think Southeast Select enters with a good chance at a foundational building block. Add some playmaking and they become more dangerous. But they start in a really good spot that I don't think a lot of these other teams in the league are going to be at. That's it for this episode. We're going to be back on Thursday. We're going to profile the second 2. We're going to profile Lakeshore Drive, and we're going to profile Yacht Club to round out the final 4. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back then and talk to you then.